The apocalypse. The apocalypse happened at the worst of times, during this horrible winter. We've been struck by a cold that we have not seen for decades. Without electricity, hardly enough food, and out there, them, lurking out in the snow. Our colony struggles to survive. We fight for the scattered resources that are left. We fight against the people that wants to ruin our chances of survival. And worst of all, we fight the zombies. Hello everyone and welcome to Board Games with Nurgleprobe, episode number 3, Dead of Winter. Alright, so Dead of Winter. It's a semi-cooperative game for 2 to 5 players designed by Isaac Vega and John Gilmore. It's also published by Plaid Hat Games. So let's start off by talking a little bit about the board and about the gameplay. The board consists of a colony, which is a place where you and all the other players place your survivors at the beginning of the game. Each player gets handed 2 survivors, and each survivor has an ability that is special to them. So, for example, if you're the Mall Santa, you can sacrifice the Mall Santa to raise the morale of the camp by 1, which makes sense because nobody likes Mall Santas, especially not this one apparently. The amount of survivors you have also informs you on how many actions you have. You get 1 action for each survivor, plus 1. So if you have 2 survivors, you have 3 action points. And what's interesting in this game is the fact that your actions are actually dice that you roll in the beginning of a turn. And then you need to use 1 dice for each action you do. There are a few free actions though within the game that you can do. For example, it's moving a survivor from one location to another. Though they can only do that once per turn, otherwise that would be completely bananas. There are 6 different locations in the game that you can move to other than the colony. An example is a school and a police station. And each location have a face-down stack of cards with items in it, like food, weapons, and sometimes even new survivors. I don't think that's items, but you know, still. To loot these piles, you need to move one of your characters to a location and use 1 of your action dice. Beware though, because each location will spawn zombies equal to the amount of survivors at that location. And at the end of the turn, if there are too many zombies, one of the survivors must die. Or will be eaten. Though you can also use your action dice to kill zombies at a location instead of looting. And the main reason for wanting to loot for items is the fact that you and the other players have to deal with a crisis each turn. A crisis can be anything from a food shortage to a horde of zombies coming for the colony. The items may also be needed to complete the main objective that is decided on in the beginning of the game, or even your own secret objective. Other than the fact that you and the other players have to struggle for the same goal, you also have to complete a secret objective that you receive at the start of the game. If you do not complete your secret objective, you cannot even be a part of the winning team. But there is a twist to this secret objective mechanic. That is the betrayer. One player may have received a betrayer objective. This basically means that that player is struggling to make you lose and complete their own objective to be the winner. And the way you lose in this game is by lowering your colony morale to 0. When a survivor dies, you lose a morale. If you do not have enough food to feed your survivors at the end of a turn, you lose morale. If you can't handle a crisis, you lose morale. And some crossroad events may cause you to lose morale. And what is a crossroad event, you ask? Well, I will take that in a second, but let's first talk about how a survivor actually dies, because this is something that freaks you out every time you play this game. And that is the exposure die. The exposure die is a 12-sided die that can roll for 4 different effects. And you have to do that every time you move to a location or kill a zombie. The 4 things that can happen is either the blank side, which is nothing, which is great, you will be very happy. Or you can roll a wound, which means that your survivor gets 1 wound. If you get 3 wounds, you die, or well, that survivor dies, which is bad for you and everyone else involved. And then there's the frostbite, which is a wound, but it will also cause 1 wound every following turn. So basically you will die within 3 turns. And then we have the horrible, horrible tooth, which is bitten, which means that that survivor dies immediately. And this bite also jumps to the next survivor at the same location, which basically means that that survivor needs to roll the die, and if they get anything other than a blank, that survivor also dies immediately. And this continues until either all the survivors at the locations are dead, or at that location are dead, or the player that has to roll the die decides, I will just kill off this character and stop this madness. Now when we covered that, let's move on to the amazing crossroad mechanic in this game. The game includes a deck of cards that are called the crossroad cards. The player to your right will draw one of these at the beginning of your turn, and if you meet a certain criteria set in that card during your turn, like moving a survivor from one location to another, or having a certain character at a certain location at a certain time, a story event will trigger. And let me give you a wonderful example of this. This card is called Horse, and it triggers if a player moves a non-exiled survivor. You slip through the alleyways, moving as quietly as you can, when you suddenly hear the clip-clop of a horse hooves on pavement. Peering out from the wreckage of a burned-out bakery, you see a half-starved horse walking down the street. Poor thing looks like it's been through a lot. But if it keeps walking through town, it doesn't stand a chance of surviving. Option 1. Attach this card to the moved survivor. For the remainder of the game, the survivor no longer has to roll for exposure when moving. As long as the survivor is not exiled, during the pay food portion of the colony phase, the colony must pay 1 additional food. Option 2. Sorry, old girl. Add 3 food to the supply. Yeah, so that's one example of what the crossroad cards can sound like and be like, and this is really amazing to add story and flavor to your characters as they move around the locations and as you do things. And it's a lot of fun to kind of build up a story from these events as you go along. And even though that is not a huge part of the game, they don't trigger that often as you might think, but when they do, they give a lot of flavor and a lot of feeling for that playthrough. And it really depends on which characters you get and where you move and what you do, and so on and so on. It's really sweet, a really sweet addition to a board game to give you that kind of story feeling without making the players tell it themselves like most board games do. Another thing that I forgot to mention was actually the exiled rule, which was mentioned here, that it was a non-exiled player that moved, or a survivor that moved. And exile basically means if all the players think that one player has the betrayer objective card, or basically the betrayer objective, they can go together and decide to exile that player. This basically means that that player's survivors are all moved out from the colony and have to move out around in the other 6 locations on the board. This also means that he discards his current card, betrayer goal or secret objective card, and draws a new objective that is called the exiled objective, I think, or something like it. Basically, he is now exiled and he has a new objective that he has to take care of to win the game. We haven't had this happen in any game yet, so I don't actually know that much about the exiled objectives or how hard they are, but it's a sweet addition to the game, I think, because first of all, you can kind of counter, you don't want to be too aggressive as the betrayer. You don't want to show off that you're the betrayer, and because then you get exiled and then you get another goal. But then as the other players, do you really want to exile the player so that they get a new goal that might be easier for them to win by? And something that is also really interesting in this game is actually some of the winning conditions that your cards have are so very specific that it seems that you play as a betrayer sometimes, even though you're actually playing for the good of the team. For one example is when you think you need to store food and a weapon in one, and it's like, do you have food? No, I don't have food. But you have so many cards in your hand, you must have food. And it's kind of interesting how this fighting begins as soon as someone can't play cards to help the crisis that's going on, and so on in the game. And there is a lot of more talking in this game that you would believe. At least with the bigger groups, you have to kind of discuss who can play what, who can add to different events, and what do we want to do with different events. The example that I told you about the horse, we actually decided, well, I didn't decide, the rest of my team, or the rest of the players decided that we should keep the horse as a kind of an item card that lets one move around without being in danger of exposure. And I thought that was a waste of time because we could just get 3 food right away, and I thought that was amazing because that was one. I don't remember that was the goal, I don't think it was, but 3 food is really good to get early in the game because that will make you, that would basically mean that you don't have to search for food. You can actually search for other items that you may need to win the game instead. And also it feeds the survivor in the colony, which is just great. But we got the horse, and of course the character that got the horse, or the survivor that got the horse, moved to a new location and immediately died on a zombie as he killed it. So that was, yeah, I kind of face-palmed when that happened. But even though I did facepalm, it was still a great amount of fun when it happened, because it was just kind of those moments where everyone went like, we should have just had 3 food right now and that would have been nice. But it didn't, because they were wrong and I was right. Well, no, of course not, maybe. And this is overall something that I love about this game. There's not a lot of things to do, but at the same time, there's a lot of things to do. It's a very simplistic game, and comparing it to other semi-cooperative games like Battlestar Galactica or Shadows over Camelot, this feels easier in a sense, even though it gives you a better story. It gives you a lot more feeling. It gives you a lot more. The theme kind of makes sense. You're in there. You want your people to survive and you want to help them. You want to collect food, but you also want weapons to kill zombies. And if you're a zombie fan, you will love this game. And even though it's not really about the zombies, it's about the people playing the game. It's about the talking to other players. It's about seeing who might be the betrayer. Can you trust everyone around the table? What should you do to handle the crisis that's currently going on? It's just, there's a lot of things, but very simple. Everyone can play it, everyone can learn it, and there's not a lot of, since we're not English here, it's not a huge language barrier. I mean, story cards, sure, that's a thing. But then you just give that to someone that's good at English and good at talking, and good at reading and talking at the same time. That's not me, by the way. So yeah, it's a really good game. It's a really, really good game, and surprisingly fun. I think it was a bit overhyped, because this game was really huge for a while. It sold out everywhere, and they could not print it fast enough to sell it. And then there were some shipping issues, I believe, and it was just sold out everywhere. And I was like, no, zombie game, I want it, and I couldn't get it. Luckily, I got it in the beginning of this year, though, so that's sweet. And yes, Dead of Winter is a clear 5 out of 5 for me. And if you love semi-cooperative or cooperative games, you will probably love this game too. And if you already enjoy games like Battlestar Galactica, and if you enjoy like Shadows over Camelot, this is another game to put in that collection next to those games. And oh yeah, it's just bananas fun. And that is the end of this Dead of Winter board game review. I am Nurgleprobe. You can find a sketch on this very same game on my Instagram, and there's links in the information no matter which site you're on, I believe. And I also do one board game review every week, so don't forget to come back and listen to the next one. I'm not sure which game it will cover yet, but we'll see. It will probably be a great one, like always. I also do 2 Instagram sketches based on board games every week, so you can find that on my Instagram, as I mentioned. And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and I will talk to you soon. See ya.